December 5th, 1945. The Florida sun beat down on Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, painting the tarmac in a shimmering heat haze. The air crackled with the energy of young men and the roar of engines. For Lieutenant Charles Taylor, leading Flight 19, it was just another routine training mission. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, sleek giants of the sky, lined up, their propellers slicing through the humid air. Taylor, a seasoned pilot, confident, perhaps even a little cocky, grinned as his crew ran through their pre-flight checks. The camaraderie was thick, a shared sense of purpose in a post-war world that was slowly finding its peace. Their mission, a simple navigation and bombing exercise, heading east over the vast blue Atlantic. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another day in paradise. The first hour was textbook. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched endlessly below, a calm, endless canvas. But then, a subtle shift. The sun, once a comforting presence, seemed to shimmer unnaturally, its light distorting at the edges of their vision. Clouds began to form, not in neat, predictable masses, but in strange, swirling patterns that seemed to defy the wind currents. Suddenly, Taylor's voice, usually so steady, crackled over the radio. "Control, this is Flight 19. My compasses are malfunctioning, acting crazy. I believe I'm over the Florida Keys, but my instruments say otherwise." A ripple of unease spread through the other 4 aircraft. Soon, reports flooded in. Static interference was tearing through their communications, making every word a struggle. Other pilots in Flight 19 also reported their compasses spinning wildly, their faces tight with confusion and growing frustration. The ocean, usually a reliable guide, offered no landmarks. "I don't know where we are." Taylor's voice, laced with a new edge of desperation, cut through the static. "I think we're completely lost." Then a chilling moment. From the second plane, young Ensign Smith, a pilot known for his calm demeanor, suddenly broke through the static. His voice was a strained whisper, barely audible. "I'm seeing a strange green glow on the horizon, Lieutenant. It's moving, sir, independently of the clouds, and it's getting closer." The transmission cut out abruptly, swallowed by a burst of white noise. Taylor, dismissing it as a hallucination brought on by fatigue or a particularly bad bout of interference, ordered the flight to change course again. He was grasping at straws, turning north, then west, then east, desperately searching for any sign of land, any familiar landmark. But nothing appeared. Just the endless, disorienting expanse of water and the increasingly erratic instrumentation. As dusk began to bleed into the sky, painting the clouds in bruised purples and ominous grays, the situation turned from bad to catastrophic. The radio transmissions from Flight 19 became fragmented, filled with shouts of confusion, desperate pleas for a bearing, and outright panic. The voices of the young men, once so confident, were now raw with terror. The last clear message ever heard from Lieutenant Charles Taylor was a chilling admission, delivered in a voice stripped bare of all bravado. "Everything is wrong, strange, even the ocean doesn't look right." The final words were garbled, lost to the overwhelming static, ending with what sounded like a collective terrified gasp, before silence descended, absolute and profound. It was a silence that would haunt the Navy and the world for decades to come. Flight 19, 5 planes and 14 men had simply vanished into the vast, indifferent expanse of the Atlantic. Back at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, the fragmented, panicked transmissions from Flight 19 had been picked up, chilling radio operators to the bone. As the last garbled words faded into silence, a grim urgency seized the base. The weather had turned, a fierce squall whipping the Atlantic, but there was no time to lose. A massive search and rescue operation was launched. Among the first responders was Lieutenant Commander Howard Powers, a seasoned search pilot, his face etched with grim determination. He boarded a PBM Mariner flying boat, its engines rumbling to life, his crew of 12 experienced but visibly tense. Their mission, find Flight 19, no matter the cost. The Mariner lifted off, battling the rising winds and pelting rain. Its powerful searchlight cut a path through the swirling darkness, a desperate beacon against the vast, unforgiving ocean. Powers reported his position, a routine check-in. Moments later, the radio room at Fort Lauderdale picked up a new distress signal. Rapid, chaotic, utterly unlike a normal Mayday. It was a cacophony of alarms and terrified shouts, abruptly silenced by a horrifying final burst of static. On the radar screen, a fleeting massive flare appeared where the PBM Mariner had been, then vanished, leaving only a blank, ominous space. Another entire aircraft and its 13-man crew had simply disappeared into the raging night. Miles away, the crew of the merchant freighter SS Gaines Mills watched in stunned silence. They reported seeing a sudden, colossal explosion in the sky, a towering pillar of flame that lasted for several minutes, directly where the PBM Mariner's last known position was. They assumed it was a catastrophic explosion, perhaps a fuel tank igniting. But what truly rattled them, what they spoke of in hushed tones for years afterward, was the sight that followed. Immediately after the fiery plume dissipated, a bizarre, swirling vortex of impossibly dark clouds formed rapidly, unlike any storm they had ever witnessed. It spun with an unnatural ferocity, then dissipated as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a sky that, moments later, became eerily calm. Despite the apparent explosion, no wreckage from the Mariner was ever found. Nothing. Days turned into weeks. The largest air and sea search in history combed the Bermuda Triangle, a staggering effort involving hundreds of ships and aircraft. They scoured every square mile of ocean, but found nothing. No debris, no oil slicks, no telltale signs of a crash, not a single life raft, no bodies. It was as if the 6 aircraft and 27 men had been meticulously erased from existence. Naval investigators were baffled, their theories crumbling against the impossible reality. Compass malfunctions, running out of fuel, a controlled ditching. None of it explained the utter lack of wreckage, the complete, terrifying absence of any trace. The families of the lost men, desperate for answers, pushed for explanations. Naval officials offered vague, unsatisfying theories, often contradicting themselves. They spoke of disorientation and human error, but their words rang hollow against the gaping void left by the missing. The search quietly diminished, then finally ceased, leaving behind a chilling void. The Bermuda Triangle, a name whispered with trepidation, officially claimed another impossible mystery, forever cementing its ominous reputation as a place where the veil between worlds might just be thinner than anywhere else. The silence of the ocean, broken only by the waves, now held a deeper, more sinister secret. Years bled into decades, but the silence of Flight 19 never truly faded for some. The official narrative painted a picture of human error and unfortunate weather, but for those who had listened, who had felt the chill in their bones, it was never enough. One such person was Patrick O'Malley, a retired naval communications officer, now in his late 70s, living a quiet life haunted by a sound. He'd been just a young tech back in '45, assigned to the Fort Lauderdale base. He remembered the garbled transmissions, the panic, and then the impossible. Patrick had heard things the official reports never mentioned. Faint, almost subliminal whispers buried deep within the Flight 19 static logs. Not clear voices, no, but a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated beneath the chaos, growing stronger just before the final silence. And sometimes fleetingly, he'd swear he heard disjointed fragments of music or static melodies like a broken otherworldly lullaby just before the pilot's last desperate words. He'd reported it, of course, back then, dismissed as fatigue or the stress of the job, but he never forgot. The hum had followed him, a ghostly echo in his quiet retirement. Driven by Patrick's chilling account, a determined journalist named Sarah Jenkins, specializing in cold cases and the unexplained, began to dig. She unearthed long-forgotten, declassified naval files from the late 1940s and early 1950s. These wasn't just isolated incidents. They detailed numerous, unexplained instances of severe compass and instrument malfunctions by ships and planes passing through the Bermuda Triangle area. These weren't simple glitches. Pilots reported their needles spinning so wildly they defied physics, their instruments going haywire, as if caught in a powerful, localized magnetic anomaly. Sarah pursued every obscure lead, even interviewing an eccentric, disgraced marine physicist, Dr. Eris Thorne. Thorne, a man whose brilliant mind often veered into the fantastical, had been ridiculed for his theories on spontaneous temporal-spatial distortions. He believed these were brief, localized tears in the very fabric of reality, perhaps caused by unseen, fluctuating energy fields. He dismissed the crash theories, theorizing that Flight 19 and the PBM Mariner didn't plunge to the seabed, they were transported. He spoke, with a wild gleam in his eye, of obscure historical accounts from native tribes in the Bahamas, legends of singing stones deep in the ocean, and invisible currents that could pull canoes beneath the waves, never to be seen again. Then Sarah found a forgotten detail from the TBM Mariner's last radar logs. Hidden in a stack of microfishes, obscured by what was initially classified as equipment malfunction, was a fleeting phantom radar signature. It appeared just moments before the Mariner's catastrophic explosion, impossibly fast, impossibly erratic, unlike any known aircraft. It hovered, then vanished. Dismissed as a fluke back then, it now painted a terrifying new picture. As Sarah pieced together the puzzle, she sought out the aging sister of Ensign Smith, one of the lost Flight 19 pilots. Eleanor Vance, now a sharp-witted woman in her 90s, had dedicated her entire life to understanding her brother's disappearance. She spoke of recurring dreams she'd had since that fateful Christmas Eve, dreams of a shimmering green light engulfing her, and a feeling of immense, crushing pressure, an experience so vivid she felt it was her brother's final moments. She kept a meticulous scrapbook of every Bermuda Triangle anomaly, every conspiracy theory, every whispered possibility, convinced her brother was not dead but merely elsewhere. The hum that Patrick O'Malley described, Eleanor had heard it too, sometimes, late at night, whispering to her from the void. Eleanor Vance, now a woman whose resolve seemed to sharpen with every passing year, had transformed her quiet Florida home into a veritable archive of the unexplained. Her living room, once a space for family photos, was now dominated by charts, maps, and stacks of declassified documents. The Bermuda Triangle wasn't just a geographical area to her. It was a personal obsession, a wound that never healed. She meticulously tracked every unconfirmed sighting, every conspiracy theory, every whisper of something anomalous, convinced the Navy knew far more than it ever let on. Her relentless pursuit led her to a retired naval engineer, a man named Arthur Hayes, who had worked on the TBM Avenger program back in the 40s. His voice, raspy with age, held a tremor when Eleanor mentioned Flight 19. He confirmed that the Avengers were incredibly robust, designed to withstand immense damage. He then revealed a seldom discussed detail, a hidden emergency beacon system that would have activated on impact, even if the plane shattered into 1,000 pieces. The fact that none were ever found, Arthur stated, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is to me scientifically impossible, unless, he paused, unless they simply never impacted. He then confided in Eleanor about a rarely used experimental directional compass jammer that was being tested by the Navy in the Atlantic. Officially, it was nowhere near the Triangle, but its very existence, its capability to disrupt navigation, made him wonder. Eleanor, armed with this unsettling new information, liquidated a substantial portion of her life savings. She convinced a small, independent marine research team, specializing in deep-sea anomalies, to conduct a sonar scan of the proposed last known coordinates of Flight 19. Days turned into anxious nights as the research vessel crisscrossed the choppy waters. Then, a breakthrough. The sonar pinged, not on wreckage, but on a strange, perfectly circular depression on the ocean floor, too precise, too unnatural to be geological. Yet, there was no associated debris, no signs of a crash site. It was as if something enormous had been pressed into the seabed, then lifted cleanly away, leaving only an imprint. One of the research divers, captivated by Eleanor's story, ventured into a deep, uncharted trench miles from the main search area. Days later, he surfaced, holding a small, miraculously preserved fragment of plexiglass. It was undeniably from an Avenger cockpit, and etched into its surface, as if by immense, inexplicable pressure, was a single chilling phrase, "The light is," before the fragment broke off. It offered no answers, only deepened the impossible questions. Eleanor returned home, shaken to her core by the new discoveries. That night, as she sat in her quiet living room, sifting through the latest reports, her old radio scanner, a relic of her brother's time, began to crackle. It wasn't just static, it was an odd, almost musical feedback. A low, rhythmic hum identical to what Patrick O'Malley had described and what she had felt in her dreams. The sound pulsed, growing stronger, filling the room. And then, clear as day, a voice, distorted and echoing as if from an impossible distance, whispered a single word from the static, a familiar voice, home. It was Ensign Smith's voice, her brother. Not distressed, not panicked, but eerily calm. It was a beckoning whisper from beyond the veil, a call from the heart of the enigma. Eleanor Vance knew, with an absolute chilling certainty, that the voice was her brother, Ensign Smith. Her quiet home was now alive with a strange, otherworldly presence. She had spent weeks, fueled by sleepless nights and an unyielding desperation, constructing a sophisticated homemade radio receiver. Its makeshift antennas reached towards the sky, trying to capture the elusive whispers. And it worked. She began to pick up a recurring, fragmented transmission, a swirling vortex of distorted human voices, faint whispers, and that unnerving rhythmic hum, punctuated by flashes of the mysterious green light she'd seen in her dreams. A light so vivid it felt more like a memory. It sounded like a chorus of lost souls, disoriented, yet strangely serene, as if floating in an eternal dream. An anonymous email, a cryptic message from a burner account, led Eleanor to a forgotten nursing home, nestled deep in the Florida Everglades. There, she found an old, senile man named Walter Higgins, a former radar technician during World War II. Most days, Walter was lost in the fog of dementia, but when Eleanor mentioned Flight 19, a spark ignited in his rheumy eyes. In a moment of chilling lucidity, he recounted seeing impossible blips on his scope during the Flight 19 incident. Objects moving too fast, too erratically for any known aircraft, appearing and disappearing near the doomed flight's last known location. He babbled about them being like sky jellyfish, shimmering and pulling at the very air, before losing his train of thought again. He had been silenced by military order, forced to sign a non-disclosure, haunted by what he saw. Piece by terrifying piece, Eleanor connected the dots. The magnetic anomalies, the hum, the green light, Walter's sky jellyfish, the utterly missing wreckage, the ancient Bahamian legends of singing stones and invisible currents. She formulated her chilling conclusion. The Bermuda Triangle wasn't just a place of bad weather or magnetic fluctuations. It was a thin spot in reality, a fluctuating gateway to another dimension or plane of existence. The disappearances weren't deaths. They were abductions orchestrated by an unknown intelligent force that moved with silent, impossible grace. The static transmission on her homemade radio intensified, coalescing into something undeniably clear. Her brother, Ensign Smith's voice spoke directly to her, not from the radio, but within her very mind. He described a place of peace, a collective consciousness without pain, without fear, where they belonged. He was not suffering, he assured her. He sounded content. He offered Eleanor the same peace, the same oblivion, the same absorption into their boundless existence. He told her it was her choice, a tempting whisper of eternal tranquility. Eleanor looked at her old scrapbook, at the faded, smiling image of her brother. She understood now, a terrifying, beautiful, and utterly heartbreaking truth. Her brother was home, but it was a home she could never join, a reality she could never fully comprehend. She chose to remain in her own world, a lone guardian of an impossible secret. She compiled all her findings, all the evidence, and published it online, knowing it would be dismissed as the ramblings of a deluded old woman, but compelled to tell the truth. The story of Flight 19, the Lost Fleet, wasn't a tragedy of a crash, but a chilling tale of cosmic relocation. Eleanor, older, wiser, and forever haunted, would sometimes stand on her porch, looking out at the vast, indifferent ocean. The hum sometimes still echoed in her mind, a whisper from beyond the veil. The lost fleet was never lost. They were simply elsewhere. And the true horror wasn't their demise, but their timeless, unknowable existence within the strange, dark, and mysterious expanse of the Bermuda Triangle. And the next time you hear a strange hum over the water, you might just wonder if it's the Bermuda Triangle calling out, inviting its next passengers home.